Hey guys, so I've really been enjoying flying around this Tinyhawk 2 race, but one of the problems that I'm experiencing that I've heard a bunch of other people have as well is the VTX just doesn't seem to work that well. The range is not what I would expect it to be for a 200 milliwatt VTX. Yes, it is unlocked. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to try to replace this antenna. I've heard some other people said they had good experiences with replacing this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this antenna off and I'll be putting this micro axis on here. This isn't as simple as just unplugging it and plugging the new one in. It's going to have to be soldered on. As you can see here, there's no connector on the end of here. I've already pulled it off, and then I've spread this out. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. What I want to do first is I want to get this thing up in the air, and I am running the Foxeer Toothless 2 Nano on here, so the image is going to look a little bit different than the stock image, but what we're interested in here is the reception. I'm running a rapid fire module on my goggles, so that should give you about the best reception you can expect. I'm going to take this, I'm going to fly it around behind my house, which I'll be sitting in front of my house, so that'll give a really good indication of multipathing and obstruction. And then we will take this antenna off, put the microaxis on, and do the same flight again and see if we get a little bit better results. Hey guys, DRC from the future here. Unfortunately, the footage of the before got messed up. I don't know what happened to it. It is on the card, but I can't read it on the computer. I've tried a bunch of different things, so I'm not going to have any before footage. Okay, with the canopy removed, this is what we're looking at for the VTX antenna. So this is the antenna here. This one is the receiver antenna. This is the VTX antenna, and what you can see is, let me get something to point with. There's two places it's actually connected to the board, right here, and then a little tiny pad right here. This is the ground connection, or the shielding connection, which is where the outside sleeve of the antenna goes, and then this little tiny point right here, that's my cat, is where the antenna connection itself goes. So if we look at the antenna that we're going to be replacing it with here, we can see these outside pieces here. Those are the shield for the wiring, and then the wire itself is this little point here in the middle. Now, if you have an antenna that hasn't been modified yet to fit on here, all you're going to do is you're just going to take, it's got the connector on the end, you just cut it off, and then you'll take this clear outer, come back, you know, maybe 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch, cut that clear sheathing off the outside, pull that off, and then this is going to be braided, this outer ground or shielding, and you just pull that braid into two pieces, and then you can tin that and then tin the center as well, and then as you can see, it basically becomes what you see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to desolder this antenna, and then I'll show you what the pads look like. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky. If you've never done a job like this before, it is fairly tricky to get this actual antenna lead on there on the end because it's a pretty small pad, but let me get this desoldered, I'll show you what the pads look like, and then I will solder the new one on and I'll show you what that looks like as well. I went ahead and retrimmed this antenna so you can see what it should look like. When you're trimming the antenna, be sure that you're really careful cutting this outer sheath. I used a little razor blade, and if you push too hard you can just cut right through the whole antenna, so just be really gentle cutting that outer sheath and then pull it straight off the end, and then you can split the ground slash shielding, and then you can just nip off the insulation for the actual antenna itself. And then as you can see, that's going to line up pretty well right there and there on the board. Now I'm going to solder the antenna first, and then I'll solder the shielding on. I'm going to trim that shielding down. Of course you can see it's way too long, and I'll show you what it's like when it's done. Alright, so there we go. You can see the antenna itself is soldered on, and the shielding soldered on those tabs on the side. Now, I'm certainly no soldering expert, but this is a fairly straightforward modification. As long as you've got some decent experience soldering, and you've got a good soldering iron and some good solder, you can do this as well. Just be careful, because as you can see, especially there with the antenna end, it's pretty close to some other components. So if you're not careful, you could end up bridging some of those. So just be careful when you're doing the soldering job. Alright, let's get this together and get some flight footage and see how it is as opposed to the original antenna. Alright, well, as you can see, swapping out that linear antenna for this RHCP antenna made a huge difference. Now, there's a ton of interference around where I'm flying. I am in a neighborhood and there's routers everywhere, and so there's always going to be interference in the signal. but before, as you could see, it was a lot worse. So I think this is definitely a very good upgrade. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but if you have some basic soldering skills and a decent soldering iron and some decent solder, you can do this, and I think it's a very worthwhile upgrade for this quad as well as the Tinyhawk 2. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. Got a lot more videos coming up. And if you have any questions, please leave it down in the comments. I appreciate if you subscribe, and a thumbs up is awesome. Thanks.